So we have so many change in the automotive sector, but also opportunities. But the most important thing is the capacity that we have to solve them. For that reason, today we have an industry rockstar, Harald Gottsche, President and CEO of the BMW Group. So please welcome to Harald Gottsche.
I would like to talk about three things. First, I would like to give a short outlook or overview of what BMW plant San Luis Potosí is. And then I would like to talk about two major challenges I do see for the Mexican industry. That is A, our environment, the VUCA world, and B, electrification and carbon neutrality. So our plant San Luis Potosí is capable of building 35 jobs per hour. So far, since the start of production in 2019, we have produced more than 134,000 cars. 3,000 associates work here in our plant. The state estimates that about 30,000 jobs were created since our arrival. And of course, we benefit from the huge supply network here in Mexico. So BMW is being supplied by more than 220 suppliers out of Mexico. In addition to that, 60 service providers work here in BMW plant San Luis Potosí. We basically produce for export. 95% of our cars go to export, roughly 60% of that to the US market. But we also supply out of San Luis Potosí markets as Japan, Australia, New Zealand, or Europe, like the UK or Germany. A quick overview. So our start of production was in April 2019 with the 3 Series. Since then, we have exported to more and more markets. In March this year, we have produced 100,000 units. And since last year, we're also producing the BMW 3 Series plug-in hybrid that can run 50 kilometers fully electric. A major step of our commitment is education. So for more than 6 years, we've been offering dual programs comparable to the dual programs in Europe. We also offer programs for the German Meister, which is the process leader. And next to education, for us, very important is also corporate social responsibility. So you see it down here. We also opened a vaccination center because we wanted to help the community. And in the vaccination center on board of the BMW premises, in collaboration with EAMS and BNSTAR, we applied more than 94,000 vaccines to people of the industrialized zone in San Luis Potosí and the local communities. We are quite proud that we so far could manage the semiconductor crisis quite well. We did not have to stop production till September. In the last weeks, it did hit us also. So we had to stop for some days production, but we're looking forward to producing and to really overcome this semiconductor shortage globally. Our products are the 3 Series. So with the 3 Series, we launched our plant here. Shortly after it launched in Munich, Germany, we launched it here. We built all kinds of variants, right-hand drive, left-hand drive, diesel, gasoline engines, plug-in hybrid, as I already said. Overall, the customer can choose theoretically of more than 100 million options of specifications for this car. And we're very proud that in September of this year, we launched the 2 Series Coupe that is exclusively produced here in San Luis Potosí for the worldwide market. So we did that launch on our own with our people here in Mexico, even though we had the circumstances of the pandemic. But we're very proud now that we have our own car, nacido in Mexico, here in Mexico for the world. A very quick overview of our plant San Luis Potosí. And now I would like to talk about two major challenges that are driving our industry here in Mexico. And the first one is basically the VUCA world. And we've been talking about VUCA for many, many years. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Those are terms that have been part of the management literature for, 10, 15 years. But we just saw in the last year that this is reality. Just think of the lockdowns that changed our world. Then the semiconductor crisis I just mentioned, the decoupling of the USA and China with a huge impact on where we produce our cars. And of course, now recently, the container crisis. So really, the last year was a great example, if you want to call it great, how quickly the environment can change and how difficult it is to make long-term plans, to make plans for the investment that really are stable. Yeah, so 5-year plans are not feasible anymore. And the core question is, how can we transform those changes into chances? And for that, I created just an overview. Yeah. So based on some factors of the Mexican automotive industry, we have to look how can we use these changes and really create chances out of that. So we do know that Mexico is in a very good position regarding international trade. There are many free trade agreements, like the USMCA, like the free trade agreements with Europe. That is why Mexico is such a good country to export cars, and BMW is benefiting from that. But of course, looking to the future, we have to ensure that we can benefit also in the future from USMCA, that we apply to those rules, and that also we benefit from those EV incentives that are currently being planned by the US government. Super important. By that also, of course, looking at the future markets, we have to look for battery production. And of course, we should look into extending our free trade agreements to markets like South Korea or South Africa. Especially if we look at the role of China and that the USA is trying to limit the imports from China, that can be a great chance for Mexico to take over part of that role of China to produce those goods. Environmental aspects. Currently, we really have a good supply of green electricity here in Mexico. We have great factors for solar power here. And of course, we have to ensure that the availability of green electric energy is being also available in the future and is being extended. And of course, we have to look also for replacements of, for example, natural gas. We use a lot of natural gas in our paint shops. So we should investigate on replacing that with biogas. Education and workforce. I really appreciate the high motivation of our workforce here in San Luis Potosí. Also, overall, we have a good and stable university network, but we should extend that. Yeah, like I mentioned, the dual programs. I think we have to train our people even more for the specific requirements of our industry, like mechanical engineering and especially the areas of the future, like Industry 3.0, big data scientists, artificial intelligence specialists. So that is an area where we should look together, how do we develop those talents. And infrastructure, overall it is good, but we have to look at the digital infrastructure. We have to look also, of course, at roadblocks and so on. That is a constant factor that has to be ensured also in the future. And if we do that, we can really turn those changes in the environment into chances for Mexico. But how do you do that? And for that, I would like to encourage you to apply a strategy process based on a management model. Either be it EFQM, the model you see on the left side, or be it the Malcolm-Baldrige model, which is quite favored in North America. But we experienced that we really need a structured strategy process to go to that resilience that we need to cope with the challenges of the future. And we at BMW Plant San Luis Potosí did that. And here basically you see the results. So in the middle, you basically see our strategy. On the left-hand side, you see the targets given by the BMW Group, looking at cost reduction, minus 25%, looking at CO2 reduction, minus 40% till 2030, looking at increasing quality satisfaction, looking at excellent time adherence. And we created on these targets our strategy. And in the middle of the strategy is our why. And our why is that we create our future by driving the benchmark of a sustainable plant. And out of this why and out of the vision that we created, we established 6 major strategic initiatives that are those spikes that you see here. And for example, I don't want to go to all of these. One of those strategic initiatives is iPlant. Yeah. So how do we transform our plant to fully digitized processes? How do we make use of the beneficiaries or of the advantages of big data analytics? Also the colleague from Mazda said that in the core of our processes are our people. Yeah, so that's why we aim to be the #1 employer of the region. Or also most sustainable plant. We are really having plans to become a CO2 neutral plant, to become basically the first CO2 neutral plant of the BMW network worldwide. And by doing that, we have a clear focus for us in the management team, but also for the whole plant to prepare ourselves for the challenges of the future. Because as I said before, making a 5-year plan that is stable, that is stiff, will not work in this VUCA environment. And the second big challenge that we see is basically carbon neutrality. Currently, the COP26 is taking place in Glasgow. This picture just shows the development over the recent years regarding global warming. And we clearly see global warming is there, and we all know the agreements of the Paris Climate Agreement, and BMW is fully committed to achieve the 1.5 degree target. And even if you're not a fan of BMW, I brought you here 2 other pictures to really show that the automotive industry is now changing. BMW has been offering its BMW i3 full electric since 2013, but now this really becomes a mass market phenomenon. So on the left side, the iconic Porsche 911. In this year, Porsche sold more full electric Taycans than 911s. Who would guess that 3 years ago? Or in September of this year, the Tesla Model 3 was the most sold car in Europe. Now, for the last 50 years, nobody could imagine that a car built in the USA would be #1 in Europe. Yeah, they really struggled if they achieved to be the number 40, number 50 on the sales charts in Europe. Yeah, and now this is on #1, and it's an electrified car. So this really shows that the change in the automotive industry is happening. It is driven, of course, in the big markets. That is Europe, that is China, and that is also now based on the recent changes in the targets of the US government. This will also be the USA. Now, BMW pushes also its electric product portfolio. So our target is that by 2030, more than 50% of the BMWs sold worldwide will be fully electrified, will be BEV cars. And you see here the recently introduced BMW iX and the just introduced BMW i4. Both of them are fully electric. And in the next years, these quickly will be followed by more and more fully electric cars by BMW. So by 2025, more than 25 fully electric cars will be available from the BMW group. So this is just to show that electrification is really happening on the global markets. But it does not stop at the products. Yeah. So our CEO Oliver Zipse clearly said we want to produce the greenest electric car by BMW, and that is more than just in the use phase, so that there is no CO2 emission once the customer is using the car. That also includes the production at our BMW plants, but it also includes the whole supply chain. And what does that mean? That means currently, roughly, during the lifespan of a car, about 50 tons of CO2 are being emitted, most of them in the customer use phase. You see here, this is average numbers, about 42 tons are being emitted by a BMW customer. Then during production, about 0.5 tons of CO2 are being emitted in the BMW plants, and we want to drive that down. BMW San Luis Potosí is in a very good shape already, with about 0.2 tons, so 200 kilograms in production, and we aim to really drive that down to 0 over the next years. But you also see that about 10 tons are being emitted in the supply chain and in the production of those parts. And this also have to be driven down, frankly, to 0. So we need to have major reductions in the CO2 emissions during the production of parts. And this will be one of the key enablers, of the key factors. So in the future, BMW will not only talk with you as suppliers about cost, about quality, flexibility, and innovation, but also about the emissions of CO2. And we do know how much work has to go into that. Yeah, I well know how much effort we put into to reduce those 0.2 tons to zero. And that just shows that really this will be one of the key drivers for the supply network over the next years. What are we doing? BMW plant San Luis Potosí already currently only uses 100% of green electricity. So all our electricity comes either from a solar power plant about 2 hours from here. And we currently also generate about 13% of our electric energy by solar panels located on our plant. You see here some pictures of our plant in the ramp-up stage. We will extend those areas so that on the premises of our plant, we will be able to produce 26% of our electricity on our own. Secondly, I said that before, our main contributor to CO2 emissions is currently our paint shop. And that is because we use natural gas for that. And we are currently exploring possibilities to replace that natural gas by biogas. And we have explored that we have a landfill area quite close to our plant in the north of San Luis Potosí. And we are now exploring together with the local communities, the local authorities, to make use of that biogas that is created there to use for our plant. And by that we can quite easily replace the natural gas. And so our target is that by 2024, we want to be fully CO2 neutral. And by this, be then the first BMW plant worldwide that really has the mark of CO2 neutrality. And as I said before, this is becoming more and more important because our customers are not accepting that they buy a car that is being produced with CO2 emissions or being produced in a, let's call it, dirty way. And this is my overview and my input. So core questions or core inputs is, how do we compete with the VUCA world? The key answer is go for a strategy process, prepare yourself to be resilient. And the second thing is we really need to go to CO2 neutrality. And that includes not only the products, but that also includes the overall production of parts and the supply chain. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to answering your questions.
Hello, Mr. Harald Gottsche. Nice to meet you. So we have a few questions from the audience that I would like to make you. The first is, Mr. Gottsche, you had perfectly described the current situation. We are living on a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. But also, as you have mentioned, the San Luis Potosí plant has successfully managed the external challenges. In that sense, which are the competitive advantages that Mexico offers for the future of the automotive industry?
There are several advantages. So one I said is we are dependent on export. Yeah. So overall, the position and the availability of free trade agreements is super important for us. Yeah, that is factor number one. Factor number two is the availability of green energy. Yeah, that's what I explored. Yeah, so we do get green energy here out of solar power plants, and we really have to make sure that this will also happen in the future. A third factor, and my colleagues in the plants in Europe and also in China and also in the US are really more and more struggling, is they really struggle to get more qualified talent. So they really struggle to get qualified people. And I can really say that this is not the case in Mexico. So we do have a high availability of people. People are highly motivated to work in industrial organizations. And if we add on the basic education that we have, if we add special trainings, what we do with our dual program, what we do with our collaboration with universities, we have great access to talented people. And these are the three major factors, next to, of course, the big supplier network that we have, that really make for us Mexico an excellent place to produce premium cars.
Perfect. Our second question is, what is your overall definition of an I plant, and how the performance of the plant San Luis Potosí can be compared with other BMW parts around the world?
Mm-hmm. So I plant is for us an intelligent plant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all know I is basically taken over from another company that produces mobile phones and other fancy stuff. Yeah. So that is for us intelligent. So what do we mean by iPlant is that we fully want to digitize our processes. And this plant was set up, let me say, with the latest technology. So for example, our assembly is paperless. Yeah. So we don't use any paper in the assembly. We use location services of tools. Yeah. So we really know where the parts are. We use lots of fully integrated process, online process control, be it in the body shop, be it in the paint shop and assembly. And what we want to do to build on that even further and to really make use of the advantages of Industry 4.0. What is that specifically? So first is, of course, quality data. Yeah. So we do have a lot of data, and we want to use that to really know where are the trends and to be proactive. One key area is we all know we've been using for 20 years process boards, yeah, in all of our areas. And usually those process boards shows the KPIs, the key performance indicators of the last week, the last day. So looking backward. What we want to do, currently all our process boards are already fully digital. And we try to develop more and more predictive indicators. So not to describe the future and what happened today, but to describe based on the data, what will happen tomorrow and look into the future. And that is what we mean with iPlant. And maybe one more example that does not only stop inside the plant, we also fully digitize our supply chain. So we know exactly, for example, which parts are being packed in from our suppliers in Europe, where is that ship, on which ship are those parts, and when will those containers arrive in the harbor. And by using these transparency, we could reduce the container detention cost. That means how long is a container has to wait at the harbor, because after 10 days, we have to pay for that. By just creating transparency on that supply chain, we could reduce detention cost every month by 100,000 euros. So 2.5 million pesos just by creating transparency, created here inside the plant with some young talented people. And these are all examples what we think what an iPlant should be and how we make really use of it. And it's not just to be fancy, but it really is to improve our business processes.
Sorry, thank you so much for that answer. I have another question from the audience, which is, for BMW and its suppliers, is there a sense of urgency to meet the CO2 reduction commitments?
It is, yeah. So it is. I thought that was clear out of my charts. It is because it is really here. Yeah. As I said, for many years we talked about CO2 reductions. We've been having climate congresses for 25 years, but there is a sense of urgency, and that is also why we put ourselves the target of being CO2 neutral as Plant San Luis Potosí already 2024. Though the BMW Group wants to reduce its CO2 emission in production by 80% till 2030. But we want to be CO2 neutral because we are a really young plant and we have good premises and we are in a good location to do that. That's why we want to be ahead. So yes, it is really a sense of urgency there. And maybe one thing more, I talked about that we just introduced the BMW iX, BMW i4, 2025, we will have 25 fully electrified cars. Looking at the planning numbers we have, every replanning, these numbers are rising quick. Yeah. So we really see that that transformation is happening quickly and we really see a high sense of urgency.
Perfect. And our last question is, does the future look bright for BMW San Luis Potosí plant?
That is our job, yeah. So frankly, it looks bright if we fight for it. It will not come by itself, yeah. So if we just don't do anything, it might be a mixed outlook. But based on what we are doing, based on our strategic initiatives, based on our cost position overall in the network, and based on our availability to produce CO2 free, I'm fully convinced that the outlook is positive, and I'm fully convinced that the production volume out of San Luis Potosí will significantly rise over the next years.